Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the Inside Talk. I am excited to host this panel discussion on health tech. We will speak about the last trends in Europe and North America through three different lenses: medical devices, digital healthcare and biotechnology, with great experts in the fields from both sides of the Atlantic. My name is Saskia Curé, founder and managing director of SCC Management for global healthcare and biotech companies. I'll be host for tonight. Let me introduce you to our panelists. Ségolène Martin, CEO and co-founder of Quantify, a Belgian company with the mission to improve human health using artificial intelligence, with a focus on medtech and biotech applications. Welcome. Happy to have you here, Ségolène. Marius Declerck, COO of ehealth Venture Brussels and board member of PAX. Welcome, Marius.
Thank you very much.
And DeGheest, founder and managing director of Health Tech Capital in Silicon Valley and MedStars, Anne is a mentor capitalist, investor and corporate advisor and a pioneer in the health tech space. Very welcome, Anne. Julien Penders, a Belgian entrepreneur in the United States, COO and co-founder of Bloom Life in the San Francisco Bay Area, and advisor at Gabi Smart Care, which is a Belgian medtech company. Welcome. Good to have you on board. Herman de Prins, Chief Information Officer at UCB Brussels. Herman has a huge experience in international businesses and IT experience in the life science industry. Welcome very much, Herman.
Thank you.
Pierre Hermant from Finance and Invest Brussels, helping growing initiatives in ehealth and other domains, will give us the highlights of the talk and speak about the ecosystem of ehealth in Brussels. Welcome. I think it's a real interesting time if you look at the evolution in ehealth. The healthcare industry responded with astonishing speed to the shock of the COVID-19 pandemic. Like practically overnight, it shifted much of its work to virtual platforms and digital technologies. And in doing so, packed a decade worth of reforms into a few short months. Work also began to shore up the weaknesses evident in the healthcare supply chain, for example. As our artificial intelligence expert, Ségolène, I would like to know what is the impact of artificial intelligence in diagnostics or drug discovery, for example. What are the new trends you see there?
Yeah, so I think we all see that artificial intelligence is really transforming the way many sectors operate, but in healthcare in particular, artificial intelligence is really having a transformative impact. So first of all, in drug discovery, a while ago you could see that machine learning was a bit seen by as like snake oil, as you say in English. Mm-hmm. So there were some doubts about the use of machine learning to speed up the discovery of new compounds. But more and more, because there is proof that it works, companies are turning to, are using artificial intelligence to discover new compounds. And it's not only at specific point of the drug discovery pipeline, but you see now applications to virtualize many steps of the drug discovery pipeline, from target identification to, for example, toxicity prediction. So it's really speeding up the way the process is done and decreasing the costs tremendously. Regarding diagnosis, I would say that there is also, of course, a transformative impact. What I've observed about in the past few years is that AI started to be used in a way to, for example, in applications to do actions that clinicians do. Typically, analyze scans, lung scans, breast scans, these kind of things. Now, more and more, you see applications of AI that are opening new doors in terms of diagnostics. I can mention, for example, a project we are working on in the field of heart failure diagnosis. We developed a model that diagnoses heart failure and specific kinds of heart failures that clinicians can't diagnose or have much difficulty to diagnose. So instead of doing actions that clinicians are doing, AI is simply opening new doors in terms of diagnosis, prevention, treatment, and so on. So it's really transformative.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Ségolène. When it comes to data and market rollout, the European Union can be seen as a very fragmented market. What is your take on this, Ségolène?
Yeah, I mean, the EU is actually we are several member states with different languages, different systems, different data sources as well. So when it comes to health and developing healthcare applications solutions, it can be pretty tricky. However, it's a hot topic right now to ensure that Europe gets a bit better in terms of health innovation and health in general. And we see a couple of initiatives that are really going into the right direction. There is the European Health Data Space, which basically aims at being a single market of healthcare, health applications and health data. So enabling, for example, the reuse of health data, which can be really promising because there is a big issue regarding the fragmentation of data sets, which has an impact on how you can use data, especially in artificial intelligence, but not only. Since a few days now, we have a new innovative health initiative, like a public-private partnership to fund projects in the field of health, biotech, but not only. And a few other initiatives like that really aim at ensuring that applications are more easily developed and more easily commercialized in the European Union. So I think this is something quite important to know for foreign investors, foreign companies aiming to develop in Europe. So it's going into the right direction. Of course, we are not there yet, but it's progressing.
Very promising. What is the EU regulatory landscape when it comes to artificial intelligence and medtech? What is the landscape here?
So we have a couple of regulations, indeed. But what should foreign companies know when it comes to medical devices? You have to know about the medical device regulation. And when we speak about so this is a regulation basically which lays out the principle in terms of development, manufacturing, and conformity assessments of devices. And it has been evolving quite a lot in the past year because there is a new version, and the status of AI, because it's of course what interests me in particular, has evolved as well. So there are a couple of new status for AI based solutions, and so they have to undergo more strict procedures in terms of conformity assessment, so it's important to know. And also, a very, very hot topic is the new artificial intelligence regulation. So there is a new proposal, and medical applications are defined as high-risk applications, as well as others. And the consequence of that is that if the regulation is adopted, they may have to undergo also some specific procedures, and they have some more specific requirements, for example, in terms of bias in the data. So this is quite important. And what is good in Brussels is that we are at the heart of the European decision-making center because the European institutions are here. So as a company, it's not bad to be close to where the decisions are taking place.
Indeed. So this is something very important for North American investors to know. Are there other topics you think about that should be relevant here regarding artificial intelligence and being close to European policy center as a main advantage maybe for further testing ground for Europe as an entrance to the Europe marketplace or other?
I mean, we see, if what we see many companies, many medical device companies, many biotech pharma companies coming to Brussels for their public affairs. So having like a headquarter, or not a headquarter, sorry, but a place of operation in Belgium or in Brussels, at least for the public affair. So yeah, it's something that is really important. I mean, regulation in the healthcare sector. So having the opportunity to be close to this decision making center, as I was saying, is really more than a nice to have, I would say.
Thank you for this important update. We also see an emerging trend in medicalization of e-health tools and the importance of the proof of clinical efficacy of digital tools like CBTs. Marius, a question. As the COO of a health venture in Brussels, what are the future trends you see in this domain? Could you elaborate on this?
Certainly, but I think that the need for clinical proof is in itself a trend, a very important one, by the way. It's we call it internally the professionalization of digital health. If you look at Modern Health or Unmind in the UK and so on, so companies in mental health, when they first started, they were very much a B2C company, sometimes with a B2B approach, but still they were not. If you would go to their website and you were looking at their communication, they were not at all focusing on the science of what they were doing. Then suddenly we started to see appearing on their websites mentioning CBT and other theories, proven science that their programs are built on. Mm-hmm. And then now with the latest massive funding rounds that they have behind them, they're starting to publish their own papers. And I think companies like that, we see them across pathological domains, and they are really, I would say, setting the benchmark or setting the scene for the next wave of digital health companies or innovation. And so I think we're not at a stage yet where clinical trials are table stake. I think we still see quite a number of innovation or startups in the digital health space that don't have proof of efficacy, mm-hmm. but I'm certain that it's coming. Also, because ultimately a lot of these tools target healthcare professionals. Healthcare professionals want to see proof of efficacy, and the more they start to see it in other tools, the more they will demand it of the new tools. And so I think all of that is, in and by itself, a trend. Relating to that, I think, an underlying trend is that we see that there is more and more space for medical professionals and scientific experts or researchers to join and to reinforce the value proposition of startups, of digital health startups. And so that's something that we're really seeing as well, is a desire from the medical side of things, from the medical space and from the scientific space to join in that innovative force.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. And as a new trend, do you also see like serious games as a big player coming in the healthcare?
Certainly. But for gaming or for serious games, we need to look more deeply at why this is an important driving force for innovation. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is almost entirely linked to behavioral science and engagement of patients or healthcare professionals in apps. Because fundamentally, what digital health tools can do that no other tools have been able to do before is to drive increased compliance of therapies, is to increase engagement, and generally is to increase the satisfaction that patients have following their therapies. And all of that comes from behavioral science. And one of the fundamental aspects of behavioral science is gaming, is rewarding, and so on and so forth. And so serious games, I think, have their place as an underlying enabler of innovation in digital health, but certainly also by themselves have a place in this whole ecosystem. I think it's still a very nascent type of innovation. We don't see it so much yet, but it's certainly coming, especially when you look at, I mean, I think the two big fields that are a bit, the two pathological domains that tend to be a little bit ahead of the curve always in healthcare are mental health and physical health, or musculoskeletal health. And if you look at those two, you're really seeing that this is where serious games are starting to unravel.
Okay, thank you. Marius, can you elaborate a bit on the access to talent you have in Brussels and like what it means for your company to be centrally located in a knowledge region, like with 4 highly ranked universities?
Of course, well, it makes the whole difference. That's, I would say, the summary, because fundamentally, again, in digital health, especially more than I would say in most other fields of innovation, you need this kind of expertise and you need access to that kind of talent. Of course, looking toward the healthcare space and towards the research or academic space, this is not typically where you will find the biggest percent relative to other populations of entrepreneurs or people who are entrepreneurially minded. But I do think that in Belgium, we are seeing a lot of them, more and more, by the way, as well. And it certainly helps to be based in Brussels because you can find expertise in various domains.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Now let's speak about digital healthcare with DeGheest. And as a corporate advisor, you are our expert in how to successfully build innovative healthcare businesses in the United States. Could you tell us a bit more on the challenge startups face in the US and like what key learnings we can take from these?
Yeah, let me expand a little bit about my background because I coined the word health tech 35 years ago and really started several companies in the space, the first granddaddy of the space, several of them gone public, create $18 billion in market creation there. So let me share my viewpoint. The reason why I coined health tech, because health tech is very different than med tech. And I think it's really important we differentiate the two. In traditional medical devices, it's all about product risk. Does it work on animals? Does it work on humans? Can you agree with the FDA? Can you get reimbursement there? And the exit is based on IP and getting the FDA and the European approval, as well as getting the KOL. This is interesting. Most of the biggest KOL in medical devices now are based in Europe, and that's for historical reasons when we had some problem with the FDA in the US. Now, health tech is the opposite. It's all about market risk. Typically, there is no strong IP. It's all about the market creation there. So the key to success is that if you have engagement, you have retention. Is this a scalable business model there? And right now, that's the area there where there is an onslaught of money. As around $24 billion was invested in the space in the US in 2021, and there's a few more weeks to go. Only 10% was in Europe. So Europe is just starting to get into that crest there. Private equity is moving in, and of course, they're trying to expand, and of course, going to Europe is a big thing. But it's a different world. And so let me share some of the lessons learned. People do not buy technology. People look for a solution to a problem. And what that means in healthcare is that healthcare at the end of the day is a service. And so somebody has to offer technology-enabled services. That means you have two choices. You could develop a technology that you sell to the provider, and then you help them change behavior, and you train them. And that doesn't always work, especially if it's something brand new. Or you basically carve out the whole space and you provide the care services like teledoctic. That means you have to do the billing, you have to manage doctors, you have to set up a call centers, you have to integrate with the medical record, you have to go back to the referring physicians there. And I think people are now trying to go to Europe and they have to try to figure out what's the best model for Europe, and maybe different from one country to another. The other thing that's critical where Brussels can help is that you have to define the problem from the viewpoint of every stakeholder. And the patient, the doctor, the nurse, the hospitals, the insurance, and the payers have different perspective. And what's nice about Brussels is that we're born international to survive in Belgium. This is a Belgium joke. And so therefore, we have a lot of people there who understand the perspective from selling to the German market, the French market, the British market, and all of that. And the reason why that's important is that an app and a device are not enough. There's a great paper that ehealth, one of my portfolio company, published. It's on the web about what are the key to success in digital therapeutics. And it's all about how do you change behavior? And it's very, very, very hard to do that. And so on the patient side, for example, digital health is moving more and more into providing tool to the patient to change behavior. And so we personalize these CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. We're trying to be proactive in coaching. We find them, we intervene before they end up in the emergency room. We also have learned that even that is not enough. You need peer support, to get people to basically start having self-determination. So what you see, some very interesting trend is we're going from active, people having to input things, to passive monitoring, where they have things in their beds. We're doing voice analysis, face analysis. Like somebody said earlier, AI is getting more and more important there. Not to react to when they have a problem, but to be proactive so that we can identify that. And so the metrics in the health tech are totally different than medtech. It's all about engagement, retention, and change of outcome. And so the comorbidity are making things even more complicated. People have 42% of Americans have at least 2 chronic diseases. I think it's the same thing in Europe. I think Europe may be a bit healthier. So the other aspect is that you have to still integrate the clinician. We cannot get rid of the clinician. They're essential to delivering healthcare. So how do we integrate with their workflow? The number of startups who just think they're going to give a better tool to the doctor and fall on their face is enormous. You have to integrate to the EMR in their tools. It cannot take more time for them, and they are very efficient already now, and they don't want to add more time to do something there. And then you have to train them. They don't have the time to be trained. So people really need to understand is that what is the objective of your application and how does it integrate into the existing care? And then I think Belgium and Brussels is really good for that because we have multicultural aspect there. You have people who speak multiple languages. We all have been working all over Europe there. So it's a great point of entry.
Great to hear, and thank you. What kind of startups do well, and what opportunities do you see in the States and or Europe for future developments?
Yeah, great question. I think at a high level, we're going from sick care, which is we wait for you to be sick and showing up in the ER in the hospitals, to really being proactive management of chronic diseases. We're trying to prevent an acute illness and then ultimately to optimize wellness. But I think right now we see where the money is still trying where the big money is chronic disease management there. And so we are trying to enable consumer-driven healthcare management as opposed to give better tools, which is what the traditional medtechs are, for the physicians there. So you may hear some terminology of what's called RPM, which is remote patient monitoring there, where the government in the US is paying on a monthly basis for the physician to monitor patient as long as they get certain type of data and they can intervene. Now this year, effective in January 1st, 2022, we're going to introduce RTM, which is remote therapy management, where the doctor is going to be rewarded to manage the therapy and hopefully change the outcome. And that again is based on telehealth, which we've discussed earlier now, is everywhere. Pretty much every provider in the US is offering that. I think in Europe is similar there. And we're developing what's called smart devices. And we're really seeing the merger of some of what's called dumbed down medical devices, where we add AI, IT, cloud computing, to basically have an integrated solution, not to treat a part of your body there that's damaged there, like in diabetes, but to treat you as a person. We are consumers, and we need to develop people and tools that allow people to have a normal life despite their chronic disease, as opposed to treating a part of the body, which is traditional medical devices. So hot area there is mental health, cardiovascular, diabetes, COPD. Primary care is being turned upside down in the US. You have private equities creating new at-risk business model there to basically be the first one who gets paid, and they're the one referring the patient to a specialist there. Amazon.care, keep an eye on that. We know that Amazon revolutionized one market after another. They're going full force into changing primary care provider, where you could get a phone call with one of their physicians there. Within 2 hours, you have somebody coming to pick up maybe your blood, if you do the diagnostics, and then you get the medication delivered to your home in 2 hours. I mean, that's kind of the dream, but they're delivering it right now with their own employees.
Yeah.
Big thing to remember in the US is the majority of doctors are no longer independent. 2/3 have sold their practice to large hospital systems. Therefore, when you sell, it's no longer one doctor that makes a decision. It's a very complex process there. And I think people really need to understand that the way decision made in Europe is very different than the US. So the best value proposition in my mind is on-demand healthcare. Digital therapeutics, software as a services that's being reimbursed. There's this new terminology now called B2C2B. So the startup contact clearly the patients there, but somebody else, like the payer, the employer, is paying for that. But you cannot expect the employers and the payers to bring you the patients. You have to go and basically acquire them. And so I think we're in a revolution. And I always joke to say healthcare is not a needle in a haystack. You have to find a problem. It's a haystack of needles. There's a ton of problem. It's all about the business models. How do you monetize it? And so the key is you have to adjust all of those models there when you go to Europe, because workflows are different, personalities are different, and the approval process are very different.
Indeed. Thank you very much. And are there any other big new trends that you see in digital health in the United States?
So I think, as I just discussed there, I mean, we have accepted that healthcare has to change, where before there was this massive resistance to change. That's a silver lining that COVID did. It just blew up all the resistance to change. And I think suddenly what we see is private equity is bringing up hundreds of millions of dollars, not to invest in company, but in changing healthcare delivery. And so they are investing in companies that have physicians that going at risk, that literally CMS right now has just announced that they are bypassing the insurance and the payers, and they're getting contracts directly with the large healthcare system to basically provide this at-risk type of contract, like, for COPD or for certain type of very big disease category. So the old silos of healthcare, where you had the providers, you had the physicians, you had the payers, and then nobody ever talked about the patients, everything is being turned upside down. And I think the deluge of money is not necessarily to develop a better technology the provider will use, is to totally change the way the providers are delivering care. It's totally changing the models. So it's a lot of fun right now, and I think that is coming to Europe.
Thank you. And do you think, the service or products drastically are different in the United States and in Europe?
That's an excellent question, because it's all about changing somebody's behavior. The socioeconomics, the languages, the cultures are all very, very different. Mm-hmm. And so, I always tell people is to say, don't take your product, get a distributor, and hope they'll sell it somewhere else. It will never work. Whenever you're going to Europe there, you have to understand there is, it's not one big continent with 800 million people you can sell to, whatever the number is. It's really a very fragmented market with different socioeconomics, different languages, different culture. And because we're talking about different workflows, you have on top of that, the fact that the way care has been given in Germany versus France versus Belgium is different. So you really need an expert who understand those behavior, understand the business there. And I think that's where Brussels in some ways unique, because it has always been the center of Europe, and it has that expertise in really helping navigate. And then like we discussed earlier, the EU approval has changed drastically. It used to be, it was easier to get approval in Belgium and in Europe before you could get the FDA. And now that's not always the case. And then all the data regulation is very different. So it's critical to adapt the product, maybe the features, but also the way you go to market and the way you monetize it. The business models in the US is very different in reimbursement than it is in Europe. So you need experts locally to figure this out.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Anne, for these great insights. Julien, you are a Belgian entrepreneur based on the West Coast. Did you also encounter what Anne just said about the challenges in creating your eHealth startup Bloom Life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Anne has been spot on a lot of challenges. Maybe to share a bit of experience along those lines. I think I'll start with what Anne mentioned as like medtech versus health tech. And I think as you start your own startup, I think you need to find your DNA, right? You need to define who you are. Are you a medtech? Are you a health tech? Because the way you're going to run the business, how you're going to monetize your assets is going to be very different. A medtech being more a product play, health tech being more a market play, or really a healthcare innovation play. So I think that's the first challenge that you run into. And that you need to define this ahead of time. You need to define what you want to do, what's your North Star, how do you want to impact healthcare, define your problem very clearly, and then develop the product, the service, the device that basically will help you serve the problem that you have identified. So I think that's the first challenge that we definitely something that we've been through at Bloom Life. Another one that I want to highlight in what I'd mentioned is healthcare integration. Like healthcare integration is key. Sometimes people consider it's even more important than the technology itself. If you have a great piece of technology, a great device, but that device is not integrated well in the healthcare systems, then it just won't be used by the clinician and by the care providers. And it's an innovation which is useless pretty much. So I think you need to, as a startup, you need to take that into account very early on. How is my service product, how will it be used by the care providers, by the doctors? And keep that in mind as you designing, your device or your service. And that's super important to define that upfront. Otherwise, you may develop something that is great, but again, will not be used by care providers. And obviously that's a problem. Another challenge that I think startup, especially tech startup, tend to forget early on is the market access strategy. How are you going to get paid, right? And for healthcare innovation or health tech innovations to be adopted at a wide scale, reimbursement is very important. Anne mentioned RPM, so the remote patient monitoring codes in the US. These are great opportunities to start getting digital health technologies or health tech technologies reimbursed at a larger scale. And again, as you create your business, try to think, you're not going to know at the very beginning exactly how you're going to get paid, but try to get some ideas, try to get some avenues to some paths, some possibilities, some options to get reimbursed. And again, doing that early on is very important to make sure that the business is successful. So those three challenges, I'll add just two more generic, and I think we touched upon that earlier on in this panel. It's funding. Actually, we may touch upon that later. Of course, cash is always important, and I don't know of a startup that for which cash has never been a challenge. So I think this is something to be to take into account. And of course, access to talent. We talked about this a lot. This is also like there is a harsh competition for talent, especially in very specialized domains such as health tech, medtech, and biotech. It's the same. So yeah, it's hard to get access to talent, and I think that is something to take into account in your decision to deploy or start a business in some locations. I mean, at Bloom Life, we based both in the US and in Belgium. And there was a reason for that, is that we found that there was great talent in Belgium, and it was important for us to have a heavy R&D force in Belgium where we can find very talented people. So, yep.
Great insights. Thank you very much, Julien. If you were based in Europe, do you think there will be other challenges? For sure, but do you see a difference in focus, priorities, or others between the United States and Europe market?
Look, I think both markets, both continents have their pros and cons for sure. I don't know that there is one better than the other. I think it really much depends on every specific business and every specific startups. To talk about our example a little bit, so Bloom Life is a maternal health company sitting really at the intersection between consumer health, digital health, and health tech. The United States for us was a great market. I mean, it's a unique market. Has great logistics. You can ship something from California to New York in like 2 days. It's a unique language. It's a unique regulation. So that definitely plays in the advantage of the US in terms of the size of the market. On the other hand, in Europe, and especially Belgium, as I mentioned before, is a great talent pool. It's really hard to find, good talent at a reasonable price in the US, where you have amazing universities in Belgium and in Europe, where you have very talented people, and you can get access to a pool of talent in Europe that you can't necessarily get access to as a startup in the US, right? And so what we did at Bloom Life is try to combine the best of both worlds. We from the get-go, we had 2 locations, one in Belgium, one in the US. And, the US operations were more focused on market access because we had identified the US as being our initial market, whereas the Belgian operations were more focused on the R&D, software, AI, data science, clinical aspects as well, because we had a better talent pool there and also a lot of connections there. So we really try to leverage, both of the continents, both of the locations for what they have to offer. And I'll add one thing. I think Anne mentioned market access, and I talked about healthcare integration before. Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the things which is really hard to do, to transpose. Let's say, if you do healthcare integration, if you really look at the user experience and the integration into different healthcare systems, you can't really transpose what you do in Europe and in the US. And I think to Anne's point, it's very important to have boots on the ground to be able to think how your service or your product will eventually be adopted, used, and integrate seamlessly into the healthcare systems. And for that, I think you really need presence on wherever you want to deploy your technology or your service. So if you decide that Europe is your market, you need to be in Europe. If you decide the US is your market, you need to be in the US. If you decide both of them are the market, like it's our case, then I think you need to be in both locations. And it's very important to do that again early on, because to Anne's point, the culture of the people, of a user, the healthcare systems are different. And this may impact your design. This may impact some of your device feature. It will certainly impact how your service is designed. And you need to know that ahead of time so that you can build that in your design and make sure you will eventually integrate seamlessly into healthcare. If you're too late on this, then you may be off by a little bit or by a lot, and then it's a problem. So I think that's a very important aspect as well.
Thank you. Julien, in terms of new trends, you were also speaking about artificial intelligence and deep data. Can you tell us a bit more about deep data? What is it?
Sure. So I think I see deep data and AI, artificial intelligence, as being really 2 aspects of the same solution to a problem. AI has been coined that it will revolutionize healthcare. I do believe it will happen. I do think there is still a lot of work to do to get to a stage where AI will really impact healthcare decisions in a reliable and meaningful way. But we will get there. But I think what we need to remember is that an AI is only as good as the data you feed it. So if you're going to develop an AI, it's going to be learning, it's going to be using the information that is in a certain data set. And I think when it comes to healthcare, if you expect your AI to make decisions about provide advice about diagnostics or certain preventive decisions, maybe, you need to provide the AI with data that will allow the AI to learn those things. And even when it comes to healthcare, it comes to physiological processes, medical processes, you need to provide data at a resolution and at a time scale that is compatible with what you expect the AI to do, which is a diagnostic or preventive decisions. And that is really what I call deep data. So deep data is not superficial data, a lot of what you can find on the web. No, it's deep data. It's data that captures the physiological process that, are happening in our body as, you go from a healthy state to a disease state, the physical processes that are associated to certain conditions. You want to be able to provide that data, to collect data, so that eventually, combined with the AI, you will be able to have a meaningful impact with what you do. And for me, that's very important. It's this combination of deep data, health data, high resolution, longer time scale, that eventually, once we have it available, will, in combination with AI, allow us to develop innovations that will have a really meaningful impact on healthcare. Absent that data, AI is not magic, as many people like to think, but it's not. It's you really need this combination of both aspects to make a meaningful innovation, I think, in the space. Yeah.
Wonderful. So it seems that there are 3 ways to enter a new market: set up a new company, or you export, or you build up a partnership that could be a real added value. Herman, you present UCB, which is one of the biggest biotech companies with headquarters in Brussels. You are dealing with serious diseases. I am really excited to hear your expertise on local partnerships. Why is it key?
First of all, many companies have a partnering strategy. It's certainly in pharma. And for UCB as a mid-sized pharma company, partnerships has been an explicit strategy since 2010. So we have lots of partners across the whole value chain. Now, being headquartered in Belgium and having a lot of activities in Belgium, we benefit, of course, from the rich biotech ecosystem that's present there. It's all short distance, etc. I may give an example of what we've done with my team. So, for instance, we developed together with local clinicians, a digital diagnostic to detect vertebra fractures on CT images. That's quite important because it's intended to be used as a predictor for osteoporosis. And if you know that 80% of the vertebra fractures are undiagnosed, you know that there's a big opportunity to help patients. So that's been developed together with local partners. It's now being out-licensed to an Austrian company to put it in the clinic and to hopefully treat many patients.
And what about the global partnership you have with Microsoft? How this could leverage the efficiency of what you already do?
Yeah. So this one is not so much about efficiency, but about speed and accelerating drug discovery. I'll give you one example or a few examples. So in summer 2020, we were part of a consortium trying to identify molecules that could be candidates to treat COVID. And we called Microsoft, and basically they gave us their compute power at massive scale. We added our algorithms and our science. And in 3 days, we did the work that normally is done in 6 months. Just as an anecdote, we consumed in those 3 days 275,000 CPU hours. So that's massive computing, and we've given the identified molecules to the consortium. That's an example where speed matters more than just efficiency. Mm-hmm. In February of this year, given that we got to know each other a bit better, Microsoft and UCB started a multi-year strategic partnership where we use Microsoft's cloud as well as their AI and combine it with our science capabilities with the same idea. It's basically accelerating drug discovery by using AI at scale to explore multidimensional data sets, many multidimensional data sets. And here the idea is really to augment the scientists' insight generation.
It's great to understand the strength you get from these partnerships. Now, let's get back with everyone for the last questions before the recap. Is there any other trends you see that we didn't discuss so far in eHealth? I'm asking the question to any of you. Or did we have everything we discussed, every new trends, every new insights? And what about the Metaverse? Is there any opportunity for the eHealth sector to use this trendy new digital reality to cure addictions or other diseases? What do you think? What is your opinion on that?
Well, there are some companies trying to use virtual reality and augmented reality for pain management, including anesthesia, decreased anesthesia. Even one case I saw when somebody delivered a baby without any type of medication, which I don't comprehend, but anyway. And so it's still a long way to go. That one company just raised a ton of money there. I think the market creation is taking a long time just because everybody's slightly different. And when you're talking healthcare there, you have to have some prediction of the effect of the therapy. And I think right now we don't necessarily know the effectiveness of this therapy because it varies from person to person. So I think right now it's not core in my mind to the change of healthcare, but there's a lot of people playing into it. And Marius, I think, has a question. Marius, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to complement what Anne's answer, and I want to go back to actually what Anne mentioned, and I think Julien mentioned it also earlier. You should never forget that there is the patient, there is the practitioner, and there is a technology in between the two. And I think the metaverse and the technologies that are related to that or associated to that can be very promising, as long as they keep in mind that those are the two key people that you need to have on board. If the metaverse becomes some kind of digital reality in which the patient should find themselves on their own, it's not going to work. If the healthcare practitioners are not trained to understand what this metaverse or what these technologies can offer, it's not going to work. So, yeah, I think as technologies, they're promising and they're exciting, but I think in terms of adoption, we're still too far for them to be truly transformative in the very short term.
Thank you, everybody. We have come to the end of our panel discussion. Have a great day, everybody, and keep well. Thank you, Pierre, for joining us to wrap up this interesting Insight Talk. Pierre, you are the CEO of Finance and Invest Brussels. What are the main evolutions you can highlight here in the e-health sector?
I think that in the ehealth sector, the recipe for helping healthcare company grows and create value for patients require several ingredients. And as the body needs blood, the economy needs talents, research companies, and money to create value for the patient. And investors from all over the world are convinced that we, Brussels, are the marketplace for medtech, health techs, and life sciences. Just to give you an example, life sciences companies listed on Euronext Brussels represent an aggregated market capitalization exceeding 21 billion euro. And so we offer, and that was also the conclusion of some of the participants of tonight, we offer a fantastic ecosystem with universities, dedicated funds, startup and scale-up parks, incubators, eHealth Valley. Marius gave us a fantastic example on that. And we have also a world-class infrastructure for clinical trials. Many big pharmas are also in Brussels. Clinical trials will become essential. It's easy to do that thanks to the 7 big university hospitals that we have in Brussels. And of course, I mean, the key is also talents and healthcare professionals. And we have world-class talents and healthcare professionals in Brussels because they are essential to finding and bringing to market the famous go-to-market for promising health IDs. So the ecosystem is a kind of magnet to attract talent. So now we have a kind of spillover effect, and we are attracting more and more talents to create value for the patient. Just to give you a number, because we were talking about the COVID, but on the 1 billion of COVID vaccines that Europe has exported to the world, 700 million have been produced in Belgium. So Belgium is really a very attractive place. And when we talk about Belgium, sometimes it's Flanders, Brussels, and Wallonia, but just Belgium is that small that to go from Flanders to Brussels, or from Brussels to Wallonia is 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So the best things to remind is that we are a fantastic market and that the Belgian governments are very supportive and doing their best to put Belgium on the map on the life science thematic.
And we are indeed at the center of Europe. What Brussels has to offer to entrepreneurs in the e-health sector.
One more time, entrepreneurs, it's people, and people is family also. And so I think that Brussels is the beating heart of the European Union. It's a unique and international city with Paris, London, Amsterdam, and Berlin just around the corner. That's also a very important thing. And being a capital on a human scales, Brussels offers a large variety of museum and entertainment. So it's also living expense, still being very kind for your bank account, and it's also great. And last but not least, we have 190 nationalities living in Brussels, so a very nice and funny environment. And if you have motivated people living in a great environment, you have talents, and if you have talents, the sky is the limit.
Thank you very much for your feedback.